And this time, we'll wait a couple seconds before starting the whole introduction so it doesn't get cut off. Hello, and welcome to the follow-up to my deck building video from earlier this week. The meetup was a few days ago, and I procrastinated a little bit. But this isn't the worst I've done. So, I played 2 games last night. One against the World Tree Arizona deck that was seen on the Metropole Grid channel. It wants to just use World Tree to constantly cycle programs until you eventually get to an end game consisting of Buzzsaw and Cleaver and Turbine to power it up, and then you just pull out value pieces over time. And so, how did that game go? Well, I had a very uneven draw. I didn't draw very much economy, but I did manage to draw into Tucana and an off-world office. So I started with a somewhat weak-looking start where I installed the off-world, I advanced it, and I put an upgrade on it. And this was behind one piece of ice. So my opponent saw that I had left R&D wide open, grabbed a conduit, and started conduiting, because when you make the obvious play to score an agenda, then R&D looks like it's going to be open for another full turn. And here, Tucana really showed its absolute wonderful power, because I was able to score the off-world office, get my economy back online, and pull out an Afshar to defend R&D, and suddenly Conduit is off, that they had spent all of their money to get. And the rest of the game, I was able to keep scoring out through that remote, and the runner didn't really challenge the remote until too late. So I was able to get multiple Tucana triggers, get ice a little bit stacked up on the remote, and keep just enough annoying obstacles on R&D to keep them from tunnel visioning Conduit. However, I never really made use of the second remote. The clicks to install things felt very wasted. Second game, I played against someone who was playing a kit Inversificator deck with World Tree to fetch engine pieces, things like Maw, things like Conduit, to again have the win con of ignoring the table I want to set up and focus R&D. That game, I didn't get a Tucana until later in the game, and they were kind of messing me up with Inversificator. I only got 1 Tucana trigger, and I think I made a mistake. My ice on the table wasn't very good, so I made the decision with my first Tucana grab to get a Nazi for R&D. But of course, they were playing Inversificator with Kit, so they already had the breaker for it. It cost them 6 credits to move it somewhere different. And I think I should have searched for the Thimble rig, because then I could start fixing their Inversificator as soon as I drew more substantial ice, and then they'd have a real problem on their hands. And again, I did not make use of the second remote very effectively. The first game I would compare to the experience of scoring out with precision design, where you just keep on scoring, getting tempo, you keep scoring, you keep getting tempo, and they can't really break in or make progress because you are just presenting serious obstacles to them being able to make runs. And rather than having powerful ice and constantly recurring a broken scoring mechanism in Seamless Launch, I instead was able to just score because they didn't effectively contest my remote. And I think that they had a chance to stop my Tucana and that they did not take. And after the game, they said, yeah, I should have stopped the Tucana. But Tucana was very effective I ignored centrals in my initial defenses, but I was able to bring them online. In the second game, I just got clowned on by Inversificator, and I never recovered from being behind with the ice that wasn't really able to keep them out. And in both games, I felt like there was no point to playing Atea because I wasn't ever putting something in the second remote. The other thing I noticed is that, especially the second game, I had to try to score out behind an anemone, because a lot of the ice I was drawing, especially when they've got they only need an inversificator, and then they can break two ice because they can swap. Like, the ice doesn't do a lot. So that's one thing that I really want to address in version 1.1. Let's duplicate this. Version 1.1. Now, interestingly, I pretty much always had an anemone somewhere in the deck. And if our goal is to fetch an anemone, we don't need 3 copies. We don't need it in hand. We just need to grab a Tucana. So I have the idea of putting this down to 1 copy. Also, the time I drew Swordsman, I know that I was facing 2 World Tree Shaper decks where they weren't really using an AI as the backbone of their strategy. But, when I drew this, I just thought, oh, this is a worse Tithe. It costs too much. Hello, Oliver. And I don't think I like Swordsman. At least not if the people who show up on time to game night are all going to be playing World Tree decks. So I'm going to cut that. The other thing I've noticed is a lot of this ice, despite my assertion that I want to have a deck full of ice that does stuff, a lot of this doesn't do anything once you've got the gear check. So Ivik is fine. It's very honest, but not great. Atini, I would say, is genuinely good. Don't mess with that, Oliver. Might have to make this quick. Atini, genuinely good. Ongoing tax, it's great. And everything else looks pretty bad once they have the tool for it. Virus was an absolute all-star because this just holds off the conduit forever while you can keep doing what you want to do in the remote a couple turns instead of icing R&D and clicking back for credits. We'll see if he wants to be on camera in a minute. So I do want at least 1 more Anansi, because I want ice that does something. Come here. Oliver, come here. Not everyone gets to hear you and think that I'm neglecting you. Even though I'm just talking to someone and you think that I'm talking to you. Alright. Another thing, this deck is kind of unstable. First game. This might be something I should just chalk up to first time shuffles. But I drew very little economy in the first game and was completely carried by my agenda scores being off-world office and having Tucana. And the second game, I had way too much economy. And I don't think Daniela, to make accesses a little harder in an unusual way, was very effective for me. Or at least I could be doing better things with this deck slot. Now, I want to keep my ice count a little high. And because we're doing fetching with with Tucana, I think I'm actually going to bring in Bathanomus. Because one thing that was kind of upsetting in the game was that I rezzed the anemone, and then the runner said, ow. And then a turn later just walked through it without breaking it. And I want to at least make them break it. And 3 net damage is not something that one simply walks through. So that brings our sentries up to 4. We still have the 1 anemone to fetch. Might consider having 1 more card. In fact, if we want to be spiteful and more techy, we could bring in, what is it called? Sadaka. And this, you rearrange R&D, great, and you may trash 1 card to trash 1 resource on a trap. So if they don't have an AI, then you can use this to take out the twinning. And some decks will just lose to this if if they've got a single twinning as their win condition. I will put this in speculatively. We're at 48 cards. We've brought the ice up a little bit. We've got 2 Ivik, 3 Atini, 2 Anansi. We should be able to draw an effective piece of ice. But I want to make this deck just a little bit more stable. Also, Reaper function. One thing that's noticeable about playing this deck, I keep having these Blood in the Waters in hand, and I can't really convert them because they know I'm playing Blood in the Waters, so they keep 3 or 4 cards in hand. And for many of those times, if I could just fire off a Reaper function, then I'd be able to score Blood in the Water. So I actually want to bring this up to 3 to make sure I have it. This brings us up to 49 cards. Is this what I want out of the deck? Not sure. We are high on ice, so we're likely to draw it. And some of our bonus weird ice with tech choices does have End the Runs with the Afshar, the Magnet, the Thimble Rig, or at least does a lot of net damage with Bathanomus. But I don't know how I'm going to make room for this, but I would consider playing Simulation Reset to just get a fresh hand on occasion. I've played some past Atea decks where I'm trying to set up Moonpool nonsense, and even if you're not trying to inconspicuously put cards into archives, having this in-faction mulligan on your hand can be great when we have all these disparate parts. Would I cut anything for this? We're pretty heavy on the ice. Our upgrades, we are heavy on the upgrades, but it's a Tucana deck. So then we would probably be looking at maybe one of these economy assets being cut. I think I want to play one more with these changes to the ice, because going down to 1 enemy but still having the trap available, having the extra Reaper function so that I can draw it. I think there's enough money in this deck. The problem I had was shuffles, because the second game I drew too much money. So for now, I'm going to cut the Simulation Reset and call this deck good. But in the future, I'm going to keep an eye on would I like to include Simulation Reset. And finally, you cannot make this much noise and not be on camera. They'll think I'm ignoring you. Alright, well, that's it. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video for playing on JNet, because it feels a little weird to just talk to the camera. Thanks for watching.